for today's webinar, Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research here at Vistage.
I'm Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research for Vistage, and I'm happy to host this latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. The series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community. Experts who provide exceptional insight and best practices to help you navigate new challenges and possibilities. Our latest CEO Confidence Index survey revealed that hiring remains a top challenge for small and mid-sized businesses. In our ongoing efforts to curate perspectives to help CEOs with this topic, we've conducted a series of roundtables. And in our member roundtable a couple months ago on hiring best practices, all three speakers shared that they were leveraging assessments. Now, our latest research also shows that just 28% of CEOs have implemented assessments to combat these hiring challenges, while 13% plan to implement assessments in the future. So to help leaders gain new perspectives on how they could benefit from assessments, today we've invited 3 Vistage members to share their story about the assessments they're using and the results they've seen for their business. Our first panelist, Todd Sondag, is Vice President of Sales and Operations at Minneapolis Oxygen Company, and he'll be sharing his experience using Culture Index and how they've translated competencies into predictive behaviors for specific roles. Next, we'll have Natalie Lometico, the CEO and President of Giroux Glass, who leverages both predictive index and the PF16 for new hires to help identify work styles and maintain a well-balanced mix of diverse individuals. Finally, we'll hear from Trey Fly, the 3rd generation president of Joe W. Fly Company Incorporated, who has found great success using the sales DNA test specifically for hiring salespeople. The way it'll work today is we'll hear from each of our 3 panelists, have them ask questions and comment on their learnings and results from each other. And at the end, I'll conduct a Q&A session with questions from the audience. So feel free to submit questions as they occur to you and direct them to the member that inspired your question for this time at the end. So let's start with you, Todd. First, share with us some details about your company, what you do, the customers you serve, and your hiring landscape.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks to the Vistage community for the opportunity to join you today. We are in the industrial welding and gas business. So we supply both medical and industrial gases to manufacturing all the way through hospitals, safety and industrial supplies and welding equipment to those alike inside of a regional area here based in Minneapolis.
All right, so tell us in your hiring landscape, what led you to use the assessments as part of your hiring process? What were you trying to fix, accomplish, or avoid?
Yeah, so we run in a very wildly competitive environment like many of our Vistage members, in which we are a small independent distributor and also competing against national and international players inside of our market. And so we needed to make sure that we hired the right people for the right seats. And so we went down this journey roughly 18 months ago to start identifying the right people and the right fit. And so you always hear, hey, I always wish I had another Adam driver. I always wish I had, another Tom in this seat because he does and performs so well in that role. And so there are ways to identify those characteristics for those employees so that we do get the right people hired up front and in the right seats. And so when we evaluated the tools that would help us do that, it wasn't just salespeople we were looking for. We had operations people we needed to hire for. We had drivers, and we also had staff and executive leadership that needed to be considered long-term for the sustainable growth of the company. And so we chose Cultural Index as a tool to help us identify those traits and those characteristics inside of those people that really excel well. And at the same time, hopeful that we can find the right seat for those people that are currently here and maybe under a little stress in their current role, and giving them a long tenure and an opportunity to succeed inside the organization. So there's 19 profiles, and we can talk further about how we utilize those profiles in that. So,
yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Ann. So when you take cultural index surveys, there's 19 of them that you can use to identify. So we set profiles for, say, a driver, and there may be 4 profiles that fit a driver profile that we know they'll be successful. Look, rolling cylinders and having routineness and being safe on the road, those are behaviors that are identifiable inside that role. So what characteristics do I need to look for inside that person as I hire them? And so as we did that and we profiled the entire company, we said, wow, look at Adam. Adam loves what he does. He's highly productive. He's safe on the road. And when we worked with our consultant through Cultural Index, he says, well, I'm not surprised. And you say, well, what are you not surprised? Well, because those are the things that line up with who he is and how he's wired. And scientifically, we know that he'll be safe, that he's detail oriented, that he can do this work and likes the routineness of it. And so then when we looked at our operations and needing and filling some additional roles in that, you say, well, identify to me what that is. And you need somebody that's multitasked, they're detailed, they're a little anticipatory. And so you can create other profiles as people take these surveys to say, oh, yes, this person is highly anticipatory. They may not be as social, but they're wildly detailed. So that makes a good operations person. And so we're getting the right people in the door, and we're able to restructure the organization internally to make sure everyone's productive.
Now, tell me, sometimes with those assessments, you might go against what the data tells you. Do you have any examples of any time that you've said, oh, but we really like that person, even though they don't align? What happens in that situation?
Yeah, so, early on in the hiring process, we have everyone take the assessment prior to interview. Say it's somebody new, we're evaluating them, we ask them to take the survey. What you find in that, Ann, is those that apply and those that take the survey, you narrow that funnel to where you get 3 or 4 really good candidates that fit the role. And so we're able to be more scientific with the way that we hire, and yet identify up front those 3 or 4 candidates that we know will be successful in that. And so there's not often that as a leadership team, we sit down and stretch ourselves and say, maybe we could make a better decision, or maybe this person would fit. We know that through that process, we've got a refined group of individuals so that we do get the right hires and we do get the right candidates in that funnel for interview and final interview. And then there is that piece of sitting down as a leadership team and saying, okay, where are we at? What are you thinking? Who is the best cultural fit for us? We have 2 great candidates because of the surveys that they've taken, and knowing what needs we have and what we need to identify inside of those profiles. And we also lean on our cultural index survey individual, our consultant, Will, who does help us with that final decision in certain times where you say, hey, Will, I have 2 candidates. Can you help us make the best decision? He'll give us a good overall, and he'll say, who are they working for? Who are they going to work for? And then give you stress points for who their current manager could be and where that stress comes in, or where they would be most productive. So we lean on that individual as well to help us make that final decision in the event that we have 2 great candidates that may fit that role.
That's interesting. So you're not just using the assessment for the individual, but you're also looking at the compatibility using the profile for their manager as well.
Yeah, and we were very open when we took the surveys originally inside the organization. We shared with everyone, their surveys and their managers to get confidence in. It's not just something that we're utilizing because we want to know who you are. We want you to understand how you work best with your boss or your manager and where that stress point may be. And then how do we have a more productive relationship, and that I may be more detailed than someone else. So he requires this, or that individual may need something more in the way that they're wired. So we roll that up and that conversation up, and people have better conversations and have a more productive relationship.
Yeah. How do you ensure adoption? Like, how do you hold people accountable to using those profiles? Because I know it's easy for them to go in the proverbial drawer and not be pulled out. So how do you have you change that in your culture?
It's education, it's communication. It's being open to the employees that this isn't something that it's not a firing tool. It's a hiring tool. It's making this an adoptive thing of how we understand, all of us, how we're wired inherently. We're going to share that with you, and yet help everyone be more productive culturally in the environment that they're in. But we were very open about what we were utilizing it for. It was not a tool that it was going to be this big rearrangement. It was to have better conversations. And then we took all the managers and we actually put them through 2 days of training. And it was fascinating to see them. We would give all their direct reports, their surveys, and they're like, yes, Tom's wired, yep, Ann's wired that way. Oh, John's wired that way. And so you can start to see the tendencies that some of these 30-year employees or tenured employees had, and yet they had frustrations in their current role. And yet there was a few that realized that maybe they weren't in the best role, and yet said, hey, I would like to do this because I think I'm more productive based on the feedback and the results I got from the survey.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that. So obviously this is something for hiring and quality candidates, but can you give an example of how you've shifted someone to a new role where they were more successful?
Yeah, so we had an operations leader that had been a tenured individual and a very smart individual, probably forgot more than I know about this industry. And as we evaluated his overall role and he sat through the training, he wasn't as detailed as he needed to be in the scope of his entire role. And the individual came and sat and said, look, I think we need to hire another ops person, and I need to get some of this work off of my desk. I'm not successfully completing what's needed out of this role. And so by going through that, it was an indirect conversation with our consultant through the training. He went home, probably self-evaluated a little bit, read the survey. We had some open conversations, and we ended up hiring a second operations person and splitting that individual's role. He's way happier. He's way more productive. He's doing the right work. And yet then we could hire somebody else to fill that role, which he was really struggling with. And he's just a happier employee and more successful and productive inside the organization.
Excellent. So you talked about some results already, happier employees, shifting people, the hiring process. What are the business results you've seen as a result of leveraging the investment?
We were a very reactionary company. We're 75 years, we're a tenured organization, we're really good at what we do, but we were reactionary. And so as humans, we like to hire people like us. You always hear, oh, I really like this individual. I hired somebody, guess what? They're just like me. But when you hire 10 people just like you end up with the same result. And so for us, it was diversifying the people inside the organization so that we went and started playing offense, and things started getting easier and we started becoming more productive. We became not a reactionary organization, but being proactive in our approach to the decisions we made, being strategic about the people that we hire and those that are internal. And really the bottom line of it is like making the company more sustainable, and we became more profitable and we became more sustainable because people were making the right decisions. They were in the right seats. And then all of a sudden that you could feel the weight shift off of the employees because we were in this firefight mode because we had an entire operation that was firefighting. And when we started getting into it and we put people in that were more proactive and more on the offense, and they weren't in that reaction mode, we became a better company. And culturally we became a better company. And at the end of the day, our bottom line absolutely shows it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that those are great learnings that you've had. Let's open it up to any questions or comments from Natalie or Trey that you might have for Todd and his experience.
Well, his experience sounds very similar to Drew Glass. Everything is on point. We have a different perspective and things that we've learned because we've been using assessments. We started dabbling into it about 15 years ago. 10 years ago, we started making it mandatory for our leadership team, and about 6 years ago, company-wide. But it's all because of the things that Todd's talking about, right? Hiring people that, our tendency to hire people similar to us, right? Mm-hmm. And so we, assessments is a great way to break it. But yes, I'm on the same page with Todd, and I get excited knowing that other companies are doing it because people are happier when they're put in roles that are more of a fit for them. So Todd, as far as the number of applicants to the number that you hire, has that changed with the assessments? I mean, what kind of reception are you getting from candidates knowing that they have to take an assessment?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Everyone's used to it today in this environment. There's a lot of organizations using assessments, so it's almost Yes, I've either taken it or I've taken something similar. So it's become a more adaptable thing in hiring. Candidates are used to taking it. And at the end of the day, if it's not of interest to you, there's somebody else that's more motivated or more excited about the role and opportunity. We want to talk to that individual that's more vested in wanting to be the right fit culturally and the right fit for the business. But it's rare for somebody to push back. The challenge we have today is, hiring drivers. They're in a seat driving a commercial vehicle, so they don't have as much time. So what we do is we've kind of adopted where we bring them in for an interview and ask them to take the assessment while they're on site versus having them preactively or, prior to interview taking it just because of resources and the ability as they're driving. But so we've adapted that way, but nobody's surprised by us asking to take an assessment up front.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that was fascinating that you talked about was how you use it for your drivers and your operations guys. I think a lot of people, myself included, think that these assessments are for higher level, skilled, office employees, departmental employees. But like you, I have about 70% of my workforce is drivers and people on the ground, boots on the ground. So I think it's really cool, and I'd like to hear more about how it almost sounds like you build templates. So you take your 3 best drivers, you look at what their traits are, which of the 19 profiles they fit into, and then you're trying to, as you're interviewing for more of that role, you try to align them with those profiles. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, Trey. So there inside a cultural index, there's 19 distinctive profiles inside of the survey. And with the help of our consultant, because they've done it as long as they have, and it's a scientific approach, he could almost tell you, without us telling, like, hey, this is a driver profile. He's like, does that individual drive for you, or does that individual, are they in ops? And you're like, yeah. He's like, well, I know because I looked at thousands of surveys and I can tell they would be productive in that role. So it lines up with their scientific approach, and then us saying, hey, this is our best drivers, here's what their profiles are, and they're not surprised. So we're able to identify those up front. And we actually use it when we come in to look at a candidate. They have to fit that profile by 60%. If they're under that percentage, and it's the system itself delivering that to us, we actually pass on that opportunity in the event that we have candidates that fit the profiles. We're using science and we're also using our gut, but we know what we get with this tool. And in your case, right, mechanics, technicians, drivers, like you're like, does this person really want to drive their entire career? Yeah, we have individuals that love it. They are best left alone on the road in a truck with the music down and the windows up, and they couldn't be happier. And yet you put a profile like myself in a driver's seat, and I need more social interaction. And so you know the success of that. So
well, also our drivers and our operations guys are more customer facing a lot of times than our salespeople or account managers. So they need those skills as well. And I think that's what you don't know when you hire a driver. A lot of times when you're hiring a driver, it's out of necessity, it's need. You need someone right away, and you're just like, whoever I can get in here that's got a valid license and pass insurance can be a driver. But that's not really the case. Yes, they can drive a vehicle, but can they, pass along the culture and the message of the customer, of the company, and take care of the customer? Those are the things you don't really know until later down the road. So.
Yeah, Trey, I mean, and you can relate to this with having vehicles. There are large advertisements going down the road every day with your name on them. So having that person and the right person in that seat, and the fact that they're not cutting people off in traffic, or they're polite when they go through a drive-through, or when they're getting gas, and the interaction is going to be positive. We know those inherent traits. And the 4 things that they measure inside of Culture Index is how autonomous they are, how social they are, how conforming they are, and how detailed they are. And so you look at that profile, and you don't necessarily need them to be overly social, but you can't have them so far off the scale that they don't want to talk to anybody, because they will be customer facing. Yet you need them to be detailed because they're filling out manifests, they're hauling gas, they're meeting in customers and making sure that they're delivering the orders. So yeah, it's we know the risk reward when we may or may not decide to deviate from the survey.
Great. Well, let's go to Natalie next. So again, we'll start with details about your company, what you do, the customers you serve, and the roles that you've been focused on filling.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Natalie. I'm the CEO and president of Giroux Glass. We have 6 offices in 3 states, California.
I think we lost your audio, Natalie.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Natalie, I'm CEO and president of Giroux Glass. We have 6 offices in California, Nevada, and Arizona. We're ranked one of the largest glass and glazing contractors in the United States. We do projects such as the glass bridge over the Grand Canyon, hotels, casinos, SoFi Stadium, Raiders Stadium, higher education, and so forth, and a little bit of celebrity homes, being here in downtown Los Angeles. We have a non-union staff in our field. Non-union field employees in Arizona. We're union in California and Nevada. And we are a 100% employee-owned company. So we started using and we are also now 76-year-old company. So we started dabbling into assessments over 15 years ago. 10 years ago, mandatory for our leadership team, and it's evolved to today where we do it for all new hires outside of the union for now. But listening to Todd, it's I am going to start talking to the union because I think it will help them profile the right people. But very similar to Todd, it has been a game changer. And the more that we have used assessments, the more it has helped our companies. And, because we've been doing it for many years, we did have people come in and say, what if I test wrong? What is this? And we say, there is no wrong or right personality. It's what is truly unique to your skill sets and how we can bring you in and help make you successful, right? And also, as far as putting different personality types together, we use predictive index, which is a more simple 3-type question assessment, but very accurate. And it measures how a person thinks they are, how they really are, and then how people see them. So, that's one of the measurements to see if that type of situation is in alignment with how they think they are, what they are, and how they think people perceive them. But also they have different profile types and so forth. And we do see very similar, we hire a project manager, we find similar project managers that have the same assessments and so forth. But I thought I would bring something interesting up right here that you asked, Todd. You asked, has there been a time that it didn't work out? So yes, and I'm the one to blame. We interviewed someone for a project management position, loved his personality, great personality. And I was so focused on the fact that, they'll be selling to our clients. Our clients are general contractors, building operators, but primarily general contractors. And so even though his personality type said that he isn't too detailed and doesn't like a lot of structure, I was so focused on his great sales abilities. So we brought him in and he sold to us how wonderful he was at project management. But when it came down to details of his project, it was horrific. So, sometimes it takes reminders like that there's a reason why you use assessments, and don't mess with the science, right? And they're not 100%, but I'll tell you, through the 10 years that we have been using assessments, most of the time they are. And also it goes in alignment with our culture. Even before we were employee owned, we were all about continual learning, bringing out the best, bringing different perspectives together, so that together to the companies, that together we can be the best that we can do. And so that it has enhanced our culture as well. It also gives us the ability to see how receptive people are when they see their assessment, because we expect them to continually want personal growth as well as professional growth. And having self-awareness is a big part of it, right? And so it has helped us instill our culture in our team and come in vulnerable with each other to share our personality types and focus and appreciating and celebrating the differences of skill sets and personalities. And so another way that we use our personality assessments is if we have a big meeting, like we're trying to close a deal, we will make sure that we have different personality types in there. You know, those that just want to make a decision and those that say, hold up, let's research a little more. So it has been tremendously successful. We've also used it. Sometimes we have conflict between a subordinate and their supervisor. And so we pull out those assessments and see where there might be a disconnect. And then we bring in through PF16, we have consultants, so we'll bring them on to coach them. So it seems to be that as the years pass, we just value them more and more. For example, I'm here seeing the different tools that Todd, and I'm going to hear from Trey what they're using. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to look into those tools and see how that may help enhance us. But I highly recommend them. I think it also has helped us retain employees. Again, I'm excited to join Giroux because we're interested in helping them for who they are. And so we get feedback like that. We get feedback of saying, gosh, I was really nervous about taking that personality assessment, but I'm so glad I do. And then I hear them encouraging others to, to look in their personality and be more self-aware. And then also the most important aspect, or one of the most important aspects, is that we encourage them to look at their personality, and it'll come with questions and action items of how they can enhance their skill set. So we encourage them, go to other people, ask them about their personality, go to somebody completely different than you and see how you work better together. For example, my personality is I love rules, but I don't think I need to follow them unless they make sense to me, right? So that is not a good thing. I'm the CEO and I'm supposed to have everyone follow rules, right? And so I go to someone with the opposite personality that's very detailed and wants to make sure they gather more data to slow me down, right? So, we're all doing it from the top to everyone in between and around, and just really celebrating the idea and putting into practice through assessments, how together we're better.
Thank you. So I wanted to dig a little bit more into, there's two different assessments that you're leveraging. You mentioned the PF15 and then the predictive index. Can you talk a little bit more about what the roles of both of those assessments are?
Okay, so the predictive index is, we have a subscription. So we use it for all of our prospective hires and new hires. And then when they come on board, we go over it with them. But it's much more simple. It has graphs, charts. It's probably about 5 pages, but it's enough for us to see, open-mindedness and enough to know if there's a, too far of a distance between what the role they're applying to. But Todd had mentioned with his assessment about how you can get profiled employees for certain roles. Predictive index also offers that, or we can have our top performers and kind of parallel that to our new hires. And then the PF16, what I was told is it's similar to what the Secret Service uses.
Okay.
So when I read mine, it's about 26 pages. I shut it. I said, oh my God, how embarrassing. I'm a horrible person. But they say, read it. And then you'll meet with a consultant for about 45 minutes and they will go over it with you. Right. And then you read it again and again. And by the time I was done reading it, whether I liked it or not, it was exactly how I am. And I took it the first time 8 years ago. I have it on my phone and on my computer, and I read it often. And I'm telling you, I'm the same. But the beautiful thing is that you can see the areas of where you want to work on. And if you're aware of them, you can work on it. And that's a question that I brought up to the assessment, our consultants. I said, well, if your personality is the way it is, can you do anything about it? And they say the only way you can is if the person wants to, right? And so, I mean, it can't be completely different. Someone that's an extrovert is suddenly an introvert, but their styles, right? For example, I'm a very open person, right? And I learned through this assessment, to me, that was a way that I would engage with others to get them to feel comfortable with me, right? But I learned that someone with another personality, that might make them feel uncomfortable, right? And so thank God, I need to pay attention to those things. So I think because I'm such an advocate for assessments, it has helped everybody come along in our leadership team. And I believe that when people see that they're valued for their uniqueness, it brings out the best in them. And we've seen that many, many times. I think our last indicator of the happiness of our employees was over 90%. You know, it has made a tremendous difference within our organization. So predictive index is used for a larger scale. And then we offer the PF16 for those that, supervisors, when we have teams that we need to make sure work together and there might be a little disconnect. And then we continually offer it to any employee that is that eager to learn more about themselves. We will invest in them and have them take the PF16.
Okay, excellent. So you mentioned, work at team, making decisions, teams working better together. Can you share are there any other results in terms of like retention? I love the 90% happiness, obviously an engagement metric. Any other metrics or results that you can point to the assessments impacting?
Well, I could say if I go back in numbers of the company, when we first started using them, we were about maybe 26 million in revenue. And now this year we're a conservative number would be 120 million in revenue. Just a lot. I believe that if you have a culture, it has to bleed through everything that you do, and offering assessments and expecting employees to be open-minded and want to be self-aware is part of it. And so, yes, I highly recommend it.
Yep. So that's a big part of your culture, that you're able to make sure that you have people who are contributing to that and moving the company forward. So excellent.
Well, yes, the diversity,
Yeah.
right? So when I started Giroux, it was very old school construction. I'm 52 now. Everyone, I'm 52. When I started, I was 30 years old, and there was one person younger than me. And I walked around saying, oh my God, this place is just going to die off. So today we're over 38% millennials or younger, and we're 76% diverse with, and I'm talking, nationalities, upbringings, backgrounds, sexes, everything. And with that, I believe that through the assessments to help us bring in different personality types has allowed us a diversity that we need to bring out the best in our team, right?
So this is part of your diversity equation, diversity of thought and perspectives that are going to help the team move forward.
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. Todd and Trey, do you want to jump in and ask any questions or offer any comments?
Natalie, I mean, it all resonates. It's there to really state a few things. You can't mess with science. It's a scientific approach to hire. When somebody's not detailed, they're not detailed. Your project management story, that individual's not, and you knew that going into it, yet you convinced yourselves. But yeah, it's scientific, and your comment to don't mess with science has resonated wildly. Diversity. There are candidates we probably wouldn't have considered and hired them. And we have a diverse culture today inside of our organization that was predominantly Midwest. You can profile it from there. And we have a great diverse group of people. And I think a lot due to the survey. I think the piece I wanted to ask you about was, you mentioned vulnerability with your team. And, that's a scary thing. We don't want to open our cards. How do you stay vulnerable, whether it's the use of the assessments with your leadership team, and how do you use that to stay vulnerable throughout the entire organization as you continue to grow? Is a great point.
Well, the assessments open the door and make it much better. But with everything else, I'm like a open book. You know, I share, and I at Giroux, we share everything outside of individual salaries. And we get a bad rap for that. Why would you do that? But even if we didn't, they're going to have their own stories anyhow. We might as well tell them the truth, right? We're not a public company. We're a private employee-owned company. But I know a lot of private employee-owned companies that do not share numbers and do not, you know, are not open like that. But through the assessments, through open book, and also making myself available, I share things that I find that others may worry about, or what if. You know, yesterday I went to go speak to an entrepreneur club, right? They're not even out of high school yet, but that's going to be the feeder into who will be working for our companies, right? And so I share mistakes that I've made. Another thing that I do, it's outside of the assessments. However, I think it's valuable as well. I send out a Sunday letter every single week. I started the first week of the pandemic, and I vowed to myself, based on feedback from our employees, that I will do it until I retire from Giroux. And every week I share things that, you know, that I struggle with, or about my personality, and, you know, a blinders or feedback I get from people. And I'll tell you that I even though it's time consuming, it probably takes me anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to write those letters every Sunday when it's my family time. But I tell myself, as long as I know that I'm maybe influencing one person within our organization, that will make it worth it. And time again, I go to Vegas, and I heard from a glazer who got teary-eyed and said, thank you for those Sunday letters. I tell you that when I wake up on Monday morning and I read it, it makes me excited to come to work, and it gets me in the right mindset. So, you know, I think that assessments is one of them, but are the leaders willing to be vulnerable and share that they don't have all the answers all the time? They're not right all the time. In fact, even if I wanted to be right and have the right perspective all the time, I make it very clear I can't, because I only have my personality and mindset. I need you guys, right? And so it empowers employees, and it's the truth. So it helps with all of that. Did that answer your question, Todd?
Yeah, thank you.
Trey, any questions or comments?
The only question I had that come up was, Natalie, you talked about, you know, using the assessment during hiring and prepping for meetings, and, you know, learning how your one-to-ones and department managers can work together based on knowing each other's personalities. But I'm wondering if it affected, I mean, it seems like you have a pretty large organization. Did knowing the assessments, when you hired someone, did it change, or did you do anything different with training, is what I'm wondering. Training different people based on different personality types or behaviors.
Yes, as long as they fit the profile for the role, yes, but it helps of how to train them. For example, we might have somebody that's very detailed, perfect role for a project manager, right? They're managing projects. It's pretty set. That's what they do. They manage projects, but based on their personality, they might need to, they like to multitask. They like to be involved in different things. And so we have to find a way to offer them that, because then they're going to get bored. I mean, I don't think anyone in project managing will ever get bored, because it's like you're on fire all day long. However, you know, if it's a role like that, or for example, somebody in accounts payable, you know, they like the routine of it, but they also like to learn, right? So how do we offer them continual learning? So through that, we make sure that we cross train more than we have to, because we're trying to offer that variety. So for sure, it helps of how we approach, how we train people. And also, I didn't share this, but I think it's important to know. I mean, we've also protect the information from our employees. So HR gets the test, the hiring supervisor gets the test, and the individual. We do not openly send it out to others and say, hey, this is a personality type. All we do is encourage them to share it. But we don't share it for them.
Great, thank you.
Well, I love the idea that your vulnerability, and that's really part of your culture, right? The self-awareness, the open-mindedness, and you're modeling that. And I think Simon Sinek said in his conversation with Vistage that leaders go first with the vulnerability. So you're definitely modeling that, Natalie.
Thank
All right,
you.
well, thank you so much. And finally, let's go to Trey Fly. So Trey, like the others, tell us about your company and just to set the table and then dig into how you're leveraging the sales DNA assessment.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Trey Fly. I'm a third generation owner, president of Joe W. Fly Company, established in 1967. We focus on air filtration, specifically commercial and industrial. So our customers are universities, hospitals, manufacturing plants, semiconductors, you name it. You know, the larger the facility, the more complex their air filtration demands, the better for us. We are in, let's see, we have 13 physical locations in 4 states and about 175 employees. As far as hiring challenges, I mean, it's been hard over the last few years. Like I said earlier, about 70% of our employees are hourly operations type, and we've had to raise wages significantly to stay competitive. I do feel once we get people on board and we make sure we have the right people, which I really want to look at Todd's method for hiring the operations guys, because that'll help, because it is part of our process. Once they get on board, you know, sometimes we have to weed out the bad ones because we don't know what we got until after a few months. But the good ones we retain with, you know, good pay, better benefits, culture. And, you know, beyond the operations guys, we have about 25 to 30 people on our sales team, and hiring for them has traditionally been a lot more difficult. As far as, I guess, what led me to sales DNA and the assessment, to start with, I'll be vulnerable myself. We suck at interviewing people. I mean, we have forever. We're just not good at it. I think we're good at establishing relationships and meeting people. And I think that's what we did in the interview process. It was like we'd bring a candidate in. They were really happy. They seemed like someone I'd like to hang out with. They loved the same college football team as me. Like, they're a sure fit. And so that obviously doesn't work for a multitude of reasons. So, you know, a big problem with sales is for us, it takes about a year to know if we've made the right hire or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if we haven't, it costs a lot of time and money and frustration of the other employees when we do make a bad hire. So that's, you know, our track record was never, it was never that great for sales hires. And at least, I would say at least 50% of the time we were just flat out getting bad salespeople. And, you know, 6 to 12 months with bad salespeople is, it's bad for the culture, costs a lot, and it's, you know, extremely frustrating. Another reason I knew I needed to find a better way to hire was the sheer overwhelming number of unqualified candidates that would apply for every job. You know, we'd put a job for a account manager out, and you get 100 resumes, and it takes a lot of time for HR to go through the resumes and be like, well, you know, these 90 people have zero experience and zero desire to even be in this role. Why are they submitting resumes? I think they just get on Indeed and hit apply all down the way. So that sucks time and energy from the HR team. And then it, you know, without having any quantifiable data, all they're looking at is a resume to decide who they're going to interview. So there's a lot of gut feel there, and they don't feel very, you know, they feel uneasy not having quantifiable data. So that was another major pain point that I discussed quite a bit with my Vistage group. Yeah, so I guess the way we found out about the sales DNA test was our CE group brought in a guy named Steve Hero from the Sales Collective, and he was talking about sales strategy and included hiring. And during his talk, he talked about this assessment called Sales DNA. So after the meeting, I pulled him aside. I said, "Look, we have these problems with hiring salespeople. We're bad at interviewing. We get the wrong guys. Costs us a lot of money." And he said, "I think I can change that. Let me tell you about this test." So long story short, because I know we're running out of time, we partnered with Steve. He helped us with sales strategy, interviewing, writing job posts, which is a big deal. We were writing them the wrong way. But with hiring specifically, the DNA test was the X factor. And it's sales specific, and it predicts the behaviors and skills of salespeople. It also can be customized based on the role you're hiring for. So there's inside sales, outside sales, account manager, etc. And it makes the unknown known. So it really quantifies your decisions, gives you data before you hire them. And I think that's the key. With our job posts, we make it a requirement that they have to take the assessment in order to submit the application. So it immediately filters out the people that aren't willing to take, 30 to 40 minutes to take the test or the assessment. Let's see. Yeah, and I mean, our HR team loves it for that reason. They get so many less resumes to sort through, and all the candidates are qualified. The sales DNA program, I think, however long they've been around, they have a 92% validity, historical validity, which means when they recommend, they have a 0 to 100 scale, and when they highly recommend a candidate, 92% of the time those candidates are the top performers within that organization.
Yeah,
that gives
so
you a little background.
not just hired, but they move on to be a top performer.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So what are some of the business results? I mean, you mentioned it costs a lot of, and there's the cost of lost opportunity by not having a good salesperson, the cost of training and time.
Yeah.
So what are some of the metrics that you've seen turn around as a result of getting the right people in earlier?
Well, I mean, the time and cost and frustration savings is the biggest thing. I mean, we were probably, I think, around 50%. That 50% of the sales hires we made did not stick. They were not bringing revenue. They were not the right culture fit. And since we started doing this assessment as part of our hiring process, we're at 100% minus one that I second guessed, and it was the same story you already heard. It was a moderate recommendation, but not a high recommendation. But we really liked the guy, and sure enough, he was great at interviewing and not great at sales. So the data has been 100% accurate for us so far, and save time, money on interviewing, onboarding, training, and I mean, we're getting solid salespeople that are performing and bringing revenue, bringing profit much quicker. Icing on the cake, I'm no longer involved in interviewing sales candidates and being responsible for the bad ones that don't pan out. So it's been a win for everybody.
Fantastic. So any considerations? I mean, I like the idea that the assessment is broken out into different types of sales roles. So any learnings to share with someone considering using a tool like that?
Well, I will say there's been several times that we've put a job posting out for a specific role, and we've got candidates that were going to be better qualified for a different role. And we've actually made 2 hires out of it. We've hired the position that we were interviewing for, but we also approached the other candidate that we really liked and said, we think you could do this role, but we'd like you to consider this other one that we weren't even hiring for. But we feel like when we find a good person, we want to put them we want to get them on the team, and they came on board too. So that was a little bonus for us that time.
That is a little bonus. Yeah. Jim Collins says the most important things are getting the right people on the bus and then getting the right people in the right seats. So it sounds like all of you really have that leverage with the assessment that you're using.
Yeah.
So Natalie or Todd, any questions or comments for Trey?
Yeah, Trey, you mentioned hiring, different skill levels are a moderate consideration in that process. Is it, when you get the assessments back, can you take somebody from being moderately good at sales and moving them up the scale to being a highly productive salesperson? Or are they inherently always going to be a moderate person? And if you can, how do you do that and coach them up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are teachable behaviors and competencies. This is something we've worked with Steve a lot on when they are in that moderate category. But the test is like 15 pages long, and it's super detailed. Rather than like a lot of the other tests we've talked about that are more about behaviors, these are about a lot of them are behaviors, but a lot of them are hard selling skills, like, hunting, ability to find decision makers, relationship building, closing, CRM ability. There's all these different things. So I think some of those are definitely trainable. And the way it breaks it out, you get to pick and choose which ones you're willing to, you can kind of have those conversations internally as part of the hiring process. Like, are we willing to take this guy if he's, a little low on being able to handle rejection? Like, is that something we can train him up on? And if so, we may decide that is something we can train him up on. And it helps a lot in our training process to know which areas they need the most focus.
Yeah, I think that's something I hadn't given thought to, is inside of the assessments we do, we know how they're inherently wired, but we
Yeah.
don't get to the point where like they're not going to do CRM.
Right.
They are. Or
A
they're not going to.
really cool thing that's part of the assessment is, and I didn't know it until I took the assessment myself, but you have to video yourself doing an elevator pitch for yourself. And it's like amazing watching these people, because immediately when you see them talking, you're like, this person has never had a conversation in their life. They don't know how to sell a thing. And then you see someone that's just so natural and fluid, and it's pretty wild to be able to see them on video.
I have never heard of that. That's a kind of a cool feature.
I know, I love that.
Yeah.
I have a question, Trey. You mentioned that they are not allowed to apply until after they take the assessment. How easy is it for them to take the assessment? In other words, if they have a technical difficulty, then they just say, oh, forget it, I'm not even applying. Is it linked to like a recruiting website, or do they send an email to your?
No, it's pretty much automated. I mean, we post it in the job ad, wherever we're posting it. We'll say Indeed or Facebook or whatever. And when they go to the job link, that's part of the, before they can submit their resume, they have to take the link, the test. And so we've seen a lot less candidates. When we would post a job and get 100, now we post a job and get maybe 10 or 12. And out of those 10 or 12, maybe 2 or 3 are highly, highly recommended, and 3 or 4 are not recommended. And, kind of, you get the whole spectrum.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right.
Piggyback on Trey's comment. We've actually made business cards that we hand out and say, we're interested in you. Would you please take an assessment on our behalf? And you may learn something about you.
Huh.
And yet you may be a good fit for us. And so we've had business cards with QR codes on them that opens the survey link. And we give them to all of our employees in the event that somebody wants to either take it, or we're looking for somebody that's a really good fit for our company. So we've utilized the assessment in another way too, to create awareness, as well as try to find the right candidates.
I love that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that, employee referrals are a great way to get candidates, but now you're adding the qualification that A, they're willing to take the time, and B, you have some really good data around whether they would be successful.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. We have just a few questions. Well, I have a few questions. There was one question for you, Todd. How long have you been using Culture Index, and do you routinely update your current team for possible changes as the Culture Index suggests? This is from someone who just completed their training this week and just trying to walk this out and see what you're doing in reality.
Yeah. We've been at this for about 18 months inside the organization, and to qualify a step back, we're a small 60 employee company, and it still applies. Yet Natalie's got a large organization. Trey has a much larger organization than we are, and these all play inside the organization. So I don't want to lose sight of, you don't have to be big to utilize an assessment, but we've been at it 18 months. I took my first cultural index survey in 2018 and took it again in late 2021, and they were the same. It's science. And so when you talk about updating our team, yes, we routinely have conversations, and I'm hoping I'm answering the question correctly, updating our team, talking about the surveys, talking about the profiles, talking about our team. As we talk about promotion, are we looking at the right candidates for that promotion to get the right people in the right seats? And yet, to Natalie's point, being vulnerable and open about who we are as humans. And so it's not a scary thing to talk about who we are. It becomes a comfortable, sometimes laughable thing like, oh yeah, Todd's always going to react this way in a meeting because this is just how he's wired. And so, yes, we spend a lot of time updating our staff in regards to the profiles.
Okay, excellent. So I have a question for all of you because we're talking really about hiring and how they are leveraged to really get the right person in and obviously improve retention, lessen attrition. But how are these each life cycle tools in terms of the reports, the insights, the things that are available to not only have for hiring, but then also provide reports for managers for coaching or further down the life cycle? So Natalie, are there some reports that are available? Obviously you use it for a lot of different purposes, but are there specific reports or insights for managers in terms of coaching?
Well, yes, there is. They'll have questions or tips of how to work best with each personality style, but also we continually use graphs. So when we bring in new people on the team, it shifts the dynamic of a team. So, we make sure that we use it to make sure we have a well-rounded team. And also if there's a disconnect in communication, where is it coming from? So it takes time to work on these things, but it's worth it. How much time do we spend trying to figure it out ourselves when there is the science and these companies that do it for many companies. And so it's not just our employees, it's a whole database of other people from other companies and what works from them.
Excellent. Trey, is there a life cycle component? Will the account manager make a good, lead a team in the future? Are you able to look at how their career would go beyond just the current position?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like we've already discussed, it helps tremendously on the hiring side and on the training side, but I think it can also show what potential career paths there are for different people down the road. We're growing so quickly that, I mean, we just hired a director of sales about a year and a half ago. And before that, it was kind of managed by committee. We're at the point now where we need several middle managers underneath him because we're just growing so quickly. So if we can use the assessments to find out which of these salespeople would be good sales trainers, which would be good sales managers. I think all that data is there if we go looking for it.
Great. And Todd, I imagine you can take someone's scientific profile and map it against another role to see how they would fit.
We can, and inside of the assessment too, you have how you're inherently wired, and then you have how you match up to your current job behaviors. And when we shift people into a different role and have them retake the assessment and they're in the right seat, their job behaviors match who they are as a human. And so then you go, we got it right. Everyone's happy. When you ask that employee, like, do you love what you do? I love what I do. Are you less stressed out? Yeah, well, we know that because the assessment and the tool, when they retake it, will show that what the job requires and how they're wired line up, and they're less stressed out. And so that's a fun piece of science that comes together and proven that they are less stressed. And so then as we move and utilize people in different roles, we get the right profiles lined up. You have them retake the survey, say 6 months into their role, and everything aligns. It's really fun to see.
Very cool. Well, I think that you've made a great case for how assessments not only help in the hiring process, but also help with your culture, with retention, with engagement. So I want to thank all of you, Todd, Natalie, and Trey, for sharing your insights. And thank everyone for being here today. We hope you'll consider thinking about how assessments might help you achieve your business goals. Okay, so be sure to join us in November for 3 can't miss webinars that we have coming up. On Friday, November 4th, we have Recruiting and Retention in the Workforce Revolution with Hire Better's Amy and Sarah. Then following that, on Friday, November 11th, Mindset 2.0, Making Hard Things Easier with Dr. Eve Masita one of our Vistage award-winning speakers coming to share her insights. And finally, for our members, we have Ron Eishog from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's coming for an exclusive discussion for Vistage members about the impact of the midterm elections on small and mid-sized businesses. That is coming on Friday, November 18th. You can register for any of these sessions now on vistage.com/webinar. That's vistage.com/webinar. So thank you all so much for your time today. Be safe and be well.